Billy the Kid, his name alone, suggests jailbreaks, gun duels, and wild rides across the New Mexico desert. That's the Hollywood version. Billy the Kid on horseback, spotless hat, sun at his back, always riding free. You see that image everywhere, stamped into legend like a brand. But the reality under that legend, what actually kept Billy up at night wasn't just the chance of catching a bullet. It was hunger grinding away at him, the stench in his own clothes, the sharp bite of lice crawling through every seam of his shirt, and the gnawing dread that tonight, hiding meant sleeping in a heap of manure. Hollywood skips that part. Picture New Mexico in 1880. Night settles over the scrub, lanterns flicker behind locked doors, and somewhere in the shadows, Billy is curled up in the rotting straw of an abandoned livestock pen, shivering. His shirt's filthy, his nerves are shot, and exhaustion seeps all the way down to his bones. Survival isn't glamorous. It's chewing hard beans laced with grit, picking at a sore on his arm that just won't heal, and scratching at something under his collar that itches like a wildfire. Every sound could be the wind or a posse drawing closer. In the real world, food, warmth, and a few hours of sleep are luxuries, and you pay for every one with filth and fear. We like to imagine Billy the Kid as a kind of Wild West, Robin Hood clean, charming, forever one step ahead. But if you put aside the legend for a minute, the question gets ugly. What did it really taste, smell, and feel like to live hunted day after day, with no safe bed, no steady meals, and no way to get clean? On the frontier, freedom meant no backup, no home most nights, not even a shred of dignity. His real name was Henry McCarty, but by the time he was famous, he'd switched to William Bonney. He was orphaned early. His mother died of tuberculosis and left him to drift in a country that honestly didn't care if he made it or not. As a teenager, he bounced through adobe towns, smoky saloons, and rough mining camps, learning fast that the law didn't protect people like him. If you wanted to stay alive, you got creative. You stole a stale loaf of bread, or slept in a chicken coop if it meant you saw another morning. At 19, Billy had already racked up more accusations for killings than he could count. Dime novels exaggerated plenty, but he was notorious enough that, after the Lincoln County War, his only welcome in town was a jail cell or a bullet. So he kept running. Most days, it wasn't about six-shooters or heroics. It was about finding a scrap of food, dodging sickness, and getting just enough sleep to not fall over. So, what's the actual cost of being an outlaw in the West? For starters, you give up hygiene. No baths, no clean clothes, sometimes not even a change of shirt for weeks. Your shirt gets stiff with sweat and grime, every seam itching with lice. After a while, you start recognizing the smell of your own armpits before you notice the stink of manure in your hiding place. If you scratched hard enough for relief, you'd tear your skin open and those sores could turn infected fast. Sickness was always a threat, wounds that never healed, water that could knock you flat with fever, and food that was more punishment than meal. Billy's daily food options? Whatever didn't get him caught. Cold beans from a dented can if he was lucky, hard jerky when he had it. Bread so stale it could chip your teeth, sometimes just a raw onion, or whatever a sympathetic ranch hand dared to sneak him before the sheriff got word. Water? Usually a horse trough with a floating layer of algae, or a muddy creek halfway to drying up. At rock bottom, you'd chew on grass or rawhide just to keep your stomach from collapsing in on itself. Want to imagine outlaw glamour? Try eating gritty beans for a week and see if you're still smiling. And sleep? Forget the movies. Billy rarely risked a real bed. Most nights it was wherever he could hide, curled up in a hayloft, under an old wagon, beneath a bush, or, if things got really grim, in the corner of a manure pile just for a scrap of warmth. It's not the stuff of legends. Ever see an outlaw hero scratch Lice for hours, then pray no one steps on his head while he's hiding under a feed trough? Didn't think so. The fear never let up. Lawmen and bounty hunters weren't just looking for a trophy, they were after the money on Billy's head. And any stranger with a gun could try their luck. Every snap twig, every hoofbeat, every distant shout meant maybe it was time to run. So you slept light, muscles knotted, half awake, ears tuned for the sound of danger, brain spinning with paranoia. Even when Billy managed a few hours in a friendly barn or a back room, he couldn't let his guard down. Every kindness was a risk for both him and whoever helped. Sometimes he'd get a hot meal or a quick patch-up, but more often he'd be slipping out before dawn, still hungry, still dirty, still honey. Billy's most reliable company wasn't a loyal gang or friendly locals. It was the itch of lice crawling in his shirt seams, the gnaw of hunger, and the reek of his own unwashed body. You learn to live with exhaustion so deep it feels like your bones are melting. That's the part they skip in the movies, the endless grind, the way filth and fear eat away at you night after night. Let's break down just how rough it got. Before the gunfights, before the jailbreaks, Billy's first challenge every night was surviving, starving, freezing, or just getting eaten alive by bugs. That's where the outlaw legend really falls apart. When you get down to the details of what he had to do to keep his body from giving out, while the world outside was sharpening its knives. So food, not whiskey at the saloon or prime rib at a chuck wagon. For Billy, a good night was cold beans from a can, maybe a chunk of jerky so tough it could double as a horseshoe. Usually it was whatever he could pinch, stale bread, a handful of pinole, a strip of butcher's gristle. You learned to eat in the dark, cold, with no fire, because lighting one could get you shot before supper. Water now, that's a gamble. The New Mexico heat could dry you out in a single afternoon. Your lips split, your mouth goes pasty, your skin flakes under a layer of sweat and dust. Clean water was for people who weren't being hunted. Billy drank from muddy puddles, algae-choked ponds, or whatever slop he could find in a trough. You might try straining it with a dirty bandana, but the real danger was invisible fevers, cramps, the kind of stomach trouble that'll make you wish for a gunfight instead. There's a special kind of outlaw roulette in drinking from a hoofprint puddle and hoping you don't end up doubled over with dysentery by sunrise. Hygiene? Forget it. Billy wore the same shirt for weeks or months. Soap was rare, and even finding a creek to rinse off meant risking your life, because nothing draws a bullet like a half-naked fugitive in open country. Sweat glued every layer of dirt to your skin. The collar scraped your neck raw. Scratch too hard, and you'd rip yourself open, adding seeping sores to the list of problems. Nobody painted a dime novel of Billy the Kid hunched over by moonlight, pulling lice out of his waistband, but that was nightly reality. If you want practical outlaw advice, here's a tip. The only sidekick who never betrayed a fugitive was a colony of body lice. Rain or shine, through gunfights and chases, those bugs stuck with you. Burning your shirt might kill them, but unless you fancied being naked and arrested, you just lived with the itch. The boots? After days on the run, blisters cracked open, grime and manure worked their way in, and infection followed. Medicine? If you were lucky, you'd pack a wound with old tobacco or tie it off with a dirty rag. Otherwise, you just kept moving and prayed the fever didn't catch you before the law did. Sleep was a trap as often as a comfort. The best you could hope for was a shallow doze, revolver in hand, never falling fully asleep. Billy slept in abandoned shacks, adobe ruins, under haystacks, wherever a body could fit. In winter, you'd burrow into straw, far enough to keep warm, but close enough to bolt if someone showed up with a shotgun. In summer, you'd wake up sticky and bitten, flies buzzing, sweat pooling in every crease. The toll wasn't just on his body, it was all in his head, too. Fear became part of the landscape. Every cough, every creak of muscle, every accidental sneeze felt like it might give you away. If you risked visiting a ranch for help, you brought danger to their door. That meant most of the time you were alone, no backup, no trusted gang, just you, your collar full of lice, and the sound of your own heartbeat pounding with anxiety. There's a saying, you can get used to anything. For Billy, that meant living with hunger cramps, sunburn on unwashed skin, the taste of slightly moldy beans, and the constant soundtrack of dread. One bad decision, a risky supply run, a cough in the dark, a night spent sleeping too deep could end everything. Billy's reputation for speed and agility wasn't just about dodging bullets. He was dodging dysentery, lice, sleep deprivation, sometimes all at once. At a certain point, even lice start to feel like familiar company. If Billy could have picked his own survival kit, I bet he'd have traded the 6-gun for a second shirt, a lice comb, and maybe a sense of humor about how low things had gotten. Because if anything's more humbling than being hunted by the law, it's spending your evenings picking bugs out of your own underwear, just hoping the next person through the door is a friend with food, not a bounty hunter. This is where the romantic image collapses. Outlaw life was never about riding under starry skies. It was crouching in muck, starving, filthy, and terrified, your sweat and blood seeping into every scratch. Billy survived not because he was superhuman, but because he could take whatever filth, hunger, and humiliation it required to make it to the next miserable sunrise. And here's the truth, those old dime novels and Hollywood epics won't touch. This kind of survival doesn't just make you dirtier or hungrier. It breaks you down from the inside out. After weeks or months on the run, exhaustion and filth become the center of your world. Every run paid for with sleep deprivation, muscle cramps, and a feverish, bone-deep fatigue that messes with your sense of reality. Imagine sleeping 2 hours at a time, wedged under a broken fence, one eye open for boots and the other half shut from hunger. Your cuts never heal. Paranoia keeps you alive and chews at your sanity. The more notorious Billy became, the lonelier and more worn down he got. By his last year, he wasn't just running from the law, he was running out of options, out of friends, and out of strength. That's the ugly cost behind every outlaw myth. Body and mind battered until even a small mistake, a wrong turn, a missed sound at midnight could be fatal. At some point, the line between clever survival and plain miserable existence blurs. Would you risk town, filthy and desperate, for a handful of stale bread, knowing anybody could turn you in? Sleep in a hayloft crawling with lice, or push on into another night so hungry your hands shake and your mind plays tricks? For Billy, these weren't hypotheticals. They were, every night, every decision. Quick draw or not, nobody outshoots starvation, sleep deprivation, or bad water forever. That's where the legend really cracks. Hollywood loves the gunfights, the jailbreaks, the swagger. But the harshest, most real ending for Billy the Kid wasn't being shot down by Pat Garrett. It was being ground down by filth, hunger, and exhaustion until there was almost nothing left. By the time it was over at Fort Sumner, Billy was half-starved, crawling with lice, nerves shot. You can almost feel the relief in that final silence. Not just the end of an outlaw, but the end of daily misery. It's easy to wish you could trade places with the kid, the freedom, the adventure, the fame. But the real price was constant fear, wounds that never healed, the humiliation of begging for scraps, and the knowledge that your own body might give out before the law ever caught up. The legend lives, because the reality is almost too awful to face. America's outlaw myth is all speed, wit, and swagger. The actual cost, filth, hunger, isolation, and a kind of misery that could make even death look like an upgrade. So next time you see Billy the Kid riding tall on a movie poster, spare a thought for the version history leaves out. The kid scratching at lice, shivering in filthy straw, living off whatever wouldn't poison him, and learning night after night that so-called freedom in the wilderness was just another word for being worn down to the bone. If you want more of the hidden physical realities behind America's outlaw legends, hit subscribe. This is the side of history you can feel in your bones and sometimes, unfortunately, crawling under your skin.